Progress.
It being on or about 6:30, I call the July 24th, 2023 meeting of the Conservation Commission to order. This meeting will be conducted remotely over Zoom. Attendance by board and or commission members will be remote. Remote attendance shall count towards a quorum. Can we begin with a roll call vote, please?
Benson, present.
Carol, present.
Allfells, present.
Spade, you're present.
All right, seeing that we have a quorum, let's proceed with our first order of business, which is 6 Carrie Marie Circle. Notice of intent for a septic system upgrade.
Good evening. If you'd like me to proceed, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, please.
My name is George Collins. I'm a registered professional engineer from Collins Civil Engineering Group, representing Michael Manzo for a septic upgrade at 6 Carrie Marie Circle. If you don't mind, I'm going to share my screen.
Please.
Let's see here. Just going to find it. What's going on? I apologize. I am not seeing. I don't know why I can't see the screen that I'm trying to share.
Are you having issues with the share function, or are you having a hard time finding the document?
I have the document right in front of me. It's just trying to make this connection, I guess. Let's see here. Where is it? I apologize. I don't know where it is. I'm gonna get out of sharing and try it one more
We
time.
can see it. We can see something on your screen.
Okay. What is this? Okay. Can you see that?
Yeah.
I can see a set of plans.
Geez. Unfortunately, that's not the right one. What the heck am I here? Can you see that?
Yep. That being a different set of plans, I can't.
Yes. Can you see my arrow?
Yep.
Okay.
And I see the address at the bottom. Seems to be correct.
Okay, great. This project's located on the north end of Carrie Marie Circle. It's a very short cul-de-sac. There's a bordering vegetated wetland in the back shown in green. The 50-foot buffer is shown in orange. The 100-foot buffer is shown in magenta. The septic system is currently in the front yard, a very small front yard. I have no idea how they fit this to begin with. There's the water service actually goes right over the septic system. This is a paved driveway. There's also a gas line and underground electric right here. So we did attempt the test hole in the front yard. If we hit all beach sand and the system was going to be relatively small, and if the water table was cooperating, we could have potentially gone in the front yard here. But that was our first test pit. We had approximately a 4-foot water table, and there was a compact silt loam that we did not break through. So we determined the front yard to be unsuitable for siting the septic system.
Hey, George, could you just enlarge that a little, make that a little bit bigger so we can read it a little easier, please?
I'm trying. Okay, here we go. There we go. Sorry about that.
Much better. Thank you.
Much better.
Okay, here we go. Sorry about that. Again, so yeah, we just lots of utilities. Here's that test pit was we were found to be unsuitable. There's really not enough access to get through the right-hand side of the property. This is like a built-up patio area that steps down in here. So we weren't even, the day of the perk test, we weren't even really able to get out in the backyard. So we really didn't even consider this as a location to put the system just because of poor site access. So we did do two test pits in these two locations, found suitable material. the disadvantage of that was the fact that the system will be placed within the 50-foot buffer zone, because of the logistical issues and the geological and hydrological reasons that I talked about. It basically pushed us into this corner. So what we're proposing is a septic tank and pump chamber in the front yard, a 2-inch force main that will run under the driveway, and then dose to the leaching field. Jennifer did comment on the fact that my original plan had grading there's an existing stone wall right here, like an old farmer's stone wall. I did originally have grading going beyond the old stone wall, basically beyond the existing developed yard. So I took another look at that, and basically what we're going to do is we're actually going to fortify the existing stone wall. It's only about 1.5 feet of grading at the back of the system. We're going to fortify that wall, put in a filter, like a couple heavy duty filter fabric, and actually grade right up against the existing stone wall. And then because we have grading right close to the wetlands, in addition to the filter mitt that's shown in red, I'm also proposing a row of straw bales behind that, just to fortify that area from an erosion control perspective. We are requesting a local upgrade approval request, and for the lack of a different term, it's basically a Board of Health variance that will allow us to have the system within the 50-foot buffer zone. Title V requires us to be outside of the buffer zone. We always make every reasonable attempt to get outside of the buffer zone, out of that 50-foot buffer zone. But in this particular case, because of the reasons that I mentioned before, it's just very, very difficult. A couple things to be aware of is this is in an ACEC. One thing that we did do is there is an existing shed here that is going to under the if this is a new project or whatever. You do not allow impervious surfaces within 100 feet of a wetland in a ACEC. That shed is coming down permanently and not being replaced. The only substantial habitat change that would occur is there is a hardwood tree right here that would be taken down, but everything else would be restored back to a lawn area. And we will not be expanding beyond the existing developed site. It's not an ideal set of circumstances, but if I don't know if you're familiar with this area, but it's off of Kristen's Way and Kevin's Way. It's all these tiny little lots that were developed in the 90s, and I've probably done 15, 16 septic systems in this particular neighborhood, just because of the age of the neighborhood, and they have all these really small lots that, if under today's standards would not even be allowed to be built. As far as placing the system within the 50-foot buffer zone, that is something that has, that the commission has approved in the past. I do have a couple of examples, 111 Washington Street and 274 Washington Street. Those are two septic upgrade projects that I have had approved within the 50-foot buffer zone without any advanced treatment. We are meeting the full water table separation requirement. So right, and another thing to be aware of, I know it shouldn't have any bearing, but there is no real estate transaction involved with this. This system is in there, the system is in very, very bad shape. Periodically, he actually does have breakout at the ground surface in the driveway. So it is somewhat urgent, but it's not, there is no real estate transaction. We're just trying to come up with the best solution, best reasonable solution possible. I'd be more than happy to answer any questions that anybody may have. I apologize that, Jen did mention about, there is some composting here that I was proposing to remove, and then quite often we do try to find a composting area outside of the 50-foot buffer zone. I did propose something in this area. I did talk to my client, and Jen actually mentioned about just removing everything from the site he has a landscape company that does the work, and he can basically make sure that they just remove everything off site if we choose not to use this compost area. The other thing is I did have a conservation post that was 2 conservation posts that were further out that I've actually put up against the existing stone wall. And again, I apologize, back to my original statement. Be more than happy to answer any questions that Jen or the commission may have.
So George, I think you have the distinction of being in not 1 but 2 ACECs on this one, which I think is the first time I've seen that. Jen, do you have comments?
Just ask George to explain the waiver request, please.
Yeah, George, would you please explain the waiver request on this project?
Yeah, so essentially the waiver, let's see, can you see the waiver request I have on the?
Yes.
Let's see here. I can't see it all with the.
Well, you have 3 of them. If you just tell us the resource areas, that'd be adequate.
Like I said, we have 2 ACECs, and then let's see, where are we here? Yeah, so what are we in, the Hockomock Swamp and Canoe River? Is that what it is? I apologize.
Oh, that was on your application, so.
What's that?
It was on your application that you're in both, so I'm assuming that's correct.
Okay. So again, basically a lot of what I've already discussed, you know, as far as, you know, why are we requesting the waivers? Basically, he had no alternative location due to soil conditions and site access limitations. 1 hardwood tree will be removed. No stormwater discharge or new pavement or impervious. And in fact, we're removing impervious within the ACEC. And then down here, you know, just a little bit of elaboration. Work within the 100-foot wetland in an ACEC due to poor soil conditions in the front yard, lack of access to the northeast corner of the site. The proposed septic upgrade location in the rear of the property in the northwest corner of the site, with the excavation and the removal of 1 large hardwood tree. There will be no I'm sorry, that should say with the exception of the removal of 1 hardwood tree, there will be no habitat taking or adverse impacts on the site. The applicant is not proposing any impervious surfaces as the result of the application. And again, since I did this, my client just says he's not relocating it, he's just removing the shed. The existing septic system is in failure, and the new septic system will provide a high level of environmental protection, meeting proper water table separation requirements. And a 2-compartment septic tank, which provides supplemental pre-treatment prior to discharging into the leaching field, exceeding the state requirements. A 2-compartment tank. I do it on all my projects, so I guess I can't specifically I didn't do it specifically for this project, but I do 2-compartment tanks, which basically have double settling, which removes you know, more solids and more nitrates. There will be no stormwater discharge as a result of the new septic system. The existing shed will be removed, and originally would be moved further away from the wetland as part of the work, but the amended plan that I submitted calls out for the shed to be removed and not relocated. You know, describe efforts to avoid alteration. All efforts have been made to optimize the septic system location, maximizing the distance to the multiple resource areas under the state regulations and bylaw. Describe efforts to minimize impacts. The area will be restored into a lawn with no introduction of impervious surfaces. Erosion controls and dewatering is proposed. You know, the public interest of the project involves the installation of a modern septic system to be installed, replacing an antiquated a failed septic system, resulting in better groundwater treatment and water quality. The improved water quality is in the best interest of the public good. Again, you know, my opinion, these septic repair projects or septic upgrade projects, you know, they're just by just the nature of what the project is. I believe that it's in the public good to fix a septic system.
George, just, there's 12 feet, it looks like on your plan between the end of grading and the resource area. I just want to make sure that I understand I guess, stone wall bolstering that you talked about earlier. If you could
Yeah,
just
so there's an existing very substantial stone wall. It's in very, very good shape. It's very pronounced. And basically I've added some, actually, I think that's the wrong, let's see, where are we here? Here we go. So there's this existing stone wall there, and the stone wall is about 2 feet tall, and we're gonna have about 1.5 feet of grading up against that 2-foot wall. And I have notes on the plan for the again, I can't read it because your faces are in the way. Here we go. Here. Existing stone wall to be utilized for retaining on the north end of the leaching, contracted to fortify and fill any gaps at stones as field conditions dictate. Heavy duty filter fabric to be placed on the south face of the stone wall. So again, we're just basically going to use the existing stone wall, and it's very substantial. It's an old farmer's wall, so like you have very large stones, and again, it's only retaining about 1.5 feet of material. So that in conjunction with the filter mitt in the back and with straw bales in the front, I think would be more than adequate to protect the wetlands during construction.
Very good. Any comments from members of the commission? Seeing none, any comments from members of the public regarding 6 Karen Marie Circle? Again, seeing none, George, I assume you'd like to close?
Yes, please.
I'll do a motion to close the public hearing with respect to the notice of intent to upgrade the septic system at 6 Karen Marie Circle.
Benson, second.
Roll call vote.
Benson, I.
Carol, I.
Fells, aye.
Spady, aye.
All right. I'll do a motion to issue a permit for work in order of conditions for 6 Karen Marie Circle.
Spady, second.
Roll call vote.
Benson, I.
Carol, I.
All Fells, aye.
Spady, aye.
Very good. Thank you, George.
He's up next.
You.
Oh, he's up next. So the next order of business is 72 Quanticut Ave, notice of intent to upgrade a septic system.
Again, George Collins from Collins Civil Engineering Group. And not to pressure you, but I have a 7:05 meeting that I'm trying to jump into after this, but obviously we're trying to nip this in the bud. I have two people on vacation. I'm kind of like, I wouldn't be here if I had my choice, if it was my choice. I apologize. So 72
okay.
I'm representing Jared Nick Canuck for a septic upgrade at 72 Quanticut Ave. And if you don't mind, I'd like to share my screen.
Please.
Hopefully I don't mess this up. Where are we here? Okay. Can you folks see that screen?
Not yet.
Oh, geez. Let's see, close that one. I don't know what's going on. I apologize. I can see it. Why can't I get this? So where are we here? Foxborough Easton. Here it is. Share. Okay. Can you see that?
Not yet, but it looks like it's coming. Yep.
Okay, great. So let's see if I can zoom out just a little bit. This property is on the west side of Paquonicket Avenue. There's a bordering vegetated wetland across the street, shown in green. Another bordering vegetated wetland in the back, shown in green. The 50-foot buffer is shown in orange here. The 100-foot buffer is shown in magenta.
George, can you, thank you. Better, thank you.
So this is a premature failure. I believe this system was installed in like 06. So, 17 years old, we would consider that a premature failure. We went in there, did some test holes, tested the Title V sand. We did use some of the old Board of Health data. And basically we're gonna keep the existing septic tank and just put in a new leaching field in the exact same location as the existing leaching field. The red dashed line is filter mitt erosion control. We have our conservation markers. Jen and I talked about modifying the location of one of the markers. It's one of these things that looked great on paper, but when we staked it out in the field, it ended up being in a kind of a not an ideal location right in front of a bench. So we will make some modifications there. There is some landscaping debris in this location. I believe Jen mentioned another location that I have instructions on the plan to be cleaned up by the contractor. We're trying to get ahead of these things so they actually get taken care of, right at the very beginning of the project. And so when Jen comes out for a pre-construction meeting, everybody's on the same wavelength as far as any cleanup is involved. And let's see it. And at this point, I guess I'd answer any questions that the commission or that Jen might have.
Thank you. Jen, do you have comments?
Yeah, George, how are you gonna access that area?
They're gonna have to just take down they're gonna have to just access everything right in the front. They're gonna have to take down the fence and go right in the front yard.
Okay, and my only other comment, other than the ones that George mentioned, was that the homeowners planted actual bamboo, and there was a note for them just to be really careful about how they dispose of it or prune it. No other comments?
All right. I do not have any comments. Any members of the commission have comments or questions on this?
I'm good. Thanks.
All right. Seeing none, George, I assume you'd like to close?
Yes, please.
I should ask any public comment on 72 Paquonicket? I'll do a motion to close the public hearing for 72 Paquonicket Ave.
Spady second.
Spadia with the second. Let's do a roll call vote.
Benson, I.
Carol, I.
Paul Phil's eye.
Spady aye.
Motion to issue a permit for work and order of conditions for the described septic system upgrade at 72 Paquonicket Ave.
Spady second.
Carol with the motion, Spadia second, roll call vote. Did we lose Al?
We lost Al.
We can still, yeah, we got 3.
Yeah, so
Good.
Carol, I.
Paul Phil's eye.
Spady aye.
Weird going first.
All right. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
And Jen, I will get that land surveyor stamp plan for Carrie Marie to you.
Okay,
And I'm gonna try to change my internal process and try to get that to you on the front end.
that would be great.
All
Thank you.
right, great. Thank you. You have a good night. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Calling the next order of business, 478 Bay Road, request for determination of applicability for a septic repair.
Hey, there I am.
Hey, good evening, Eric. Could
How
you
you doing,
introduce
everybody?
yourself for the record?
Yes, for the record, Eric Dias, registered professional engineer with Strong Point Engineering. representing Garcon Corp. At 478 Bay Road on a septic repair. I'll share my screen real quick. This one is very, very straightforward. Everybody, my screen share is loading. You should be able to see that.
Got it.
We can see it.
Okay. So this is 478 Bay Road. It is a single family home that has a failing septic system. This was discovered through a title transfer. I can say right off the bat, you see these two test pits here. We did test pits in this location. We actually found the septic system, the existing septic system, and noted that it is in the groundwater table. So right off the bat, we're making a bad situation better. If we go back to the back of the site a little bit, you'll see that in the way back of the property here, there's a BBW, and to the, I guess this would be the east side, there's a BBW and an intermittent stream. So, and there's also a FEMA floodplain, zone A in the backyard. So we managed to stay out of the 100-foot buffer zone through the BBW. We are within the 200-foot riverfront. That is a local riverfront because that is not a perennial stream. And we are a little bit within the FEMA flood zone buffer zone as well. Our tree line for the backyard is back here. So you can see we are a good distance away from all of this work with all of this proposed work. There is a fence that separates the front from the backyard. There's an existing tree line over here, and this big dashed line is a proposed impervious barrier, which probably doesn't mean a whole lot, but what it does is it allows us to not have to cut additional trees down in this location. So we wanted to keep that tree buffer there so we're not impacting habitat, things like that. All of this work is going in an existing lawn area. We have proposed sediment controls to the back of the, to the rear of the work. It will be a pumped system. So, you know, the reason we thought an RDA was appropriate is because, you know, yes, we are in some buffer zones, but we're on the outskirts of them. We're in areas that are already cleared. We're not cutting additional trees at this, for this design. And we do have the appropriate sediment controls. So we thought this was a win-win.
I just want the record to reflect that Commissioner Benson has returned. Jen, do you have comments on this?
Yeah, just that the project is not within state jurisdiction under Wetland Protection Act. This is under the bylaw only for the two buffer zone and the two floodplain and the riverfront area under the local bylaw. And we have received the revised plan. So there were no other comments from us. The whole backyard is fenced in as well.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and I should mention, forgive me, in response to some comments that Jen did initially have, we did install the conservation markers in the backyard along the existing tree line, just so it doesn't go any further than it is now.
That makes sense. Any questions from members of the commission, comments on this?
I was happy with that.
Any comments from members of the public on this? Seeing none. Motion to close the public hearing on the request for determination of applicability for 478 Bay Road.
Second.
Roll call vote.
Benson, I.
Carol, I.
Paul Fells, aye.
Spady, aye.
All right. I'll do a motion to issue a negative determination of applicability for the request for determination of applicability for a septic repair at 478 Bay Road, noting it is a -2 under the bylaw.
Benson, second.
Carol with the motion, Benson second. Roll call vote.
Benson, I.
Carol, I.
Paul Fells, aye.
Spady, aye.
All right, Eric, thank you.
Well, thank you all for your time. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
Calling the next order of business, 718 Washington Street. Abbreviated notice of resource area delineation for the purpose of verifying wetland resource areas at 718 Washington Street.
They've requested a continuance to the 8/7 meeting.
All right, I'll do a motion to continue 718 Washington Street to the August 7th meeting of the Conservation Commission.
Second.
I'll second.
Sorry, Roy, I think Mike beat you on that one.
It's okay with me.
Carol with the motion, Spadia with the second. Roll call vote.
Benson, I.
Carol, I.
Caulfield's eye.
Speedy, aye.
That was it for new business. Next order of business is a continued hearing for 91 Union Street, and I believe the applicant here has also requested a continuance. So 91 Union Street requested a continuance to the September 25th meeting of the Conservation Commission. So I'll make a motion.
Can I ask a question, please?
Absolutely.
How many continuances have they had in a row? At least 4 or 5?
I don't know the answer to that. Jen, do you?
Not off the top of my head, it's been a number. They're asking for continuances while they're in appeal with the town of Brockton.
Okay.
So I will do a motion to continue 91 Union Street until the September 25th, 2023 meeting of the Conservation Commission.
Caulfield second.
All right, Carol motion, Caulfield second, roll call vote.
Benson, I.
Carol, I.
Caulfield's eye.
Speedy, aye.
All right, turning next, request for modification 530 and 550 Turnpike Street.
So I promoted everyone, but we really don't have too much to discuss. So I'm just going to mention that we were waiting to receive the revised plans and the stormwater information. John Chesia has reviewed them and recommended one condition to witness the soils under the infiltration basin after excavation and prior to any backfill. So that is a condition that is in your draft order of conditions permit for work. There are no other issues.
Okay, but could the applicants just introduce themselves for the record?
Hi, you have John O'Leary from Rhino Capital here for the record. And again, I don't know why my camera's not working. It looks like I'm blacked out. I tried to turn it on. I apologize.
We can hear you.
Okay, great.
Hi, everybody. Robert Pellegrini for PK Boston Law.
And Austin Chartier, Mackenzie Engineering Group, the civil engineer on the project.
All right, so I know at the last meeting we had a sort of a detailed explanation of the modification that you guys were requesting, and it sounds like, Jen, we've gotten what we need out of peer review at this point. Is there anything that you'd like to add to this discussion?
No,
Nope.
nothing
Okay.
particularly from our end. We didn't have anything prepared this evening, so happy to answer any questions, but that's all we got.
I reviewed the modification language, Jen, that you put in. Does any members of the commission have questions or comments on this?
No, I looked at the order of conditions as well and was satisfied with the change.
Very good. So I will do, this is one of those points where my inexperience is getting me. Do I close a public hearing on this? All right. I guess when in doubt, just close a public hearing. I assume you guys would like to close.
Yes.
All right. I'll do a motion to close the public hearing for the request for modification at 530 and 550 Turnpike Street.
Benson, second.
Carol with the motion, Benson second, roll call vote.
Benson, I.
Carol, I.
Caulfield's eye.
Speedy, aye.
All right, motion to issue the requested modification for 530, 550 Turnpike Street.
Benson, second.
Carol motion, Benson second, roll call vote.
Benson, I.
Carol, I.
Caulfield's eye.
Speedy, aye.
All right, very good.
Thank you.
Thank
you
you.
so much.
Have a nice night. Thanks again.
You too.
So Jen, I think we had 72 Randall got added to the agenda. Should we do that now or after certificates of compliance?
You could do that now. Eric is still here.
Yeah, let's bring that back up. I did have a conversation with Mike just to let him know that I do have to recuse myself on this project, so I will ask Mike to take over on this one, if you don't mind, Mike.
I am good. A few so moved. We'll get through it.
So we'll just mention that it's technically an item that's not reasonably anticipated by the chair. And so we'll have that discussion tonight, but on the next agenda, we will have to ratify the discussion and have it posted on the agenda for open meeting law requirements. But Eric had requested to be here tonight.
Excellent. I assume everybody can hear me. I can't start my video because Jen just doesn't want to look at my face anymore.
That wasn't it. I didn't know how to put you back participant section, so I blocked your video.
All good. It's all good. All right. For the record, Eric Dias, registered professional engineer with Strong Point Engineering, here tonight representing East Coast Construction Management. And I'm sure you are all familiar with their principal, Dave Welch. So I'm going to share my screen and show you guys what's going on. This is a restoration plan that was, it looks like you guys can probably see it now.
Yes.
This is a restoration plan that was provided in response to an enforcement order. So there is no file number on this. I want to start by saying that my client, Dave Welch, and his company had nothing to do with this work, with the infraction on this lot. This that you see right here, this brown line, represents a local riverfront area buffer zone, okay? And then this purple line that you see back here represents the local 100-foot PVP buffer, the vernal pool buffer. The prior owner of this lot cleared the lot, and without regard for the buffer zones. There was a plan that was in place to develop the lot and stay out of the buffer zones entirely. We actually had proposed retaining walls along the riverfront area buffer zone. That plan actually got approved by the Board of Health. Obviously, the Concom agent signed off on it because there was no work proposed in the buffer zone. And lo and behold, whoever initially bought this lot went threw the plan away and just cleared everything. My client, Mr. Welch, has bought the project knowing that he would have to do this restoration effort as a part of it. So we've coordinated with Brad Holmes in Environmental Consulting and Restoration. He put this plan together. We are proposing to restore, I'm going to zoom right in here so I can actually read this, about 7,200 square feet of riverfront area buffer zone between the riverfront and the property boundary. And it's only about just shy of 600 feet of vernal pool buffer zone down here. I feel the planting mix is appropriate. We have proposed sediment controls along the outside, or I would say the up gradient side of the restoration area, and silt fence for sediment controls on the down gradient side, only because the only sediment that should be in there is from the spoils of actually planting the plants, which won't be much. One other thing that I just want to call to your attention, I think it's kind of important to point out here, is can everybody see the new plan that I just brought up?
Yeah.
This is the A&R plan that created this lot. So lot 4 right here is 42 Randall. That's the subject of what we're talking of tonight. This is 38 Randall. The stream that cast the buffer zone is over here. As this commission knows, they granted a permit for work and an order of conditions. There is a house and a yard at 38 Randall. So this area that we're proposing to restore where my cursor is basically completely unplugged from the buffer zone. So I think that, given what we proposed here, I feel that our restoration plan is certainly adequate for what we're trying to accomplish. So I'd be glad to answer any questions that the commission may have.
Thank you, Eric.
Thank you.
Jen, do you have any comments on this?
Just we want to make the clarification, it's the buffer, it's the riverfront area versus the buffer zone, correct? Because riverfront area is a resource area.
Yes.
Just
Yeah, so my
They're very different
apologies.
requirements, so we just want to make sure we're clear. This is all within the 200-foot riverfront area.
Yeah, that is correct. This area is in the 200-foot riverfront area. The only place we are in buffer is this little portion down here is in vernal pool buffer.
Okay. I didn't have any other comments. The proposed plan looks okay to me. In the past, you've required a surety. I don't, just mentioning it in case the commission wants to talk about that.
Okay. Any comments from the commission?
Yeah, I think in general, I think a surety is a good idea here. The other thing is timing wise, is this something that would be done post-construction or pre-construction?
I would propose to do this post-construction, only because we wouldn't want things to get messed up while we're doing it. I spoke with my client earlier today. Basically what he tells me is that if he was able to start on this project, say mid-month when of August, he anticipates a spring 2024 finish date. So he would install all of the restoration plantings at the same time he does the finished landscaping on the lot, so that things are stabilized and sediment's not trying to wash into that area. And then he would go through the monitoring protocol from there. So we would anticipate having these all installed prior to the request for a certificate of occupancy. Obviously, as my client's representative, I have to try to argue against the surety, right? Because it costs my client more money. So what I might suggest to the board, just for their consideration, is that, there are opportunities outside of the surety for the commission to make sure that this gets done. They could hold up a CO for it. They could certainly give any enforcement action. And the other thing that I discussed with my client is that he would be amenable to a condition that states that, he will have this all planted prior to the CO. And if for some reason that doesn't happen, he'd be glad to post a surety at that time. But he's essentially asking for the opportunity to make it right before he has to post anything.
Mr. Chair, could I ask the agent a question?
Yep.
So Jennifer, do we have jurisdiction over a certificate of occupancy?
No.
So that's not something that we could even.
We can't hold that up.
Right.
So I would have a couple of comments on that proposal, right? You do need to require surety, or maybe it's both. There's no reason why this can't be planted in the first growing season, which would be this September, October, right? Then it has at least 2 growing seasons to stabilize and to make sure plants aren't dying. It also makes sure that the new buyer is aware of it. Waiting until the last minute has been, or until the final landscaping has been a problem in the past. And there are certainly ways to use sediment control to make sure that they are not driving into that area, or that sediment would be impacting the restored area. I would not wait until the end of landscaping.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Yeah, go ahead.
So I mean, I think that there's probably, as Jennifer said, one of 2 choices, and you could actually choose to do both. Is insist that it get done before general construction begins, in September, or even coinciding with general construction if he's going to start in August.
Sure.
And get a surety. That's something for us to decide.
I mean, I feel. Well, sure, kind of gives us a little. It is security, right? It will cover us. It'll cover that whole.
Well, it certainly, from my viewpoint, keeps the contractor on task.
Right. Yeah. I'm sorry, but continue. But
No, I think that's I think there's potentially, you know, as a group, we need to decide whether or not we want to require both or simply require him to start, you know, this fall. I think that's the other is only it's one or the other or both. I mean, those are really questions. I don't, you know, the downside is I don't see the downside of starting in September. Slight downside is potential risk to the construction by some rogue machine operator, but you know, really with adequate protection, that is a pretty low risk. You know, and as Jennifer says, that gets 2 growing seasons. You'll see which plants have not survived and be able to replace them fairly quickly. So,
and I
certainly would be in favor of that. You know, the surety. I'm typically in favor of that. So,
Al,
I would support that, both the timing and the surety.
I agree.
Unless he can demonstrate it would provide a significant hardship to the contractor, and I don't think he can do that.
Right. No, I agree. Coinciding with the whole process building going into September is fine. Yeah. Any public comment? Or am I moving too quick?
No, you're good. There's only
cool.
2 people left and they're not commenting.
Right. So let's make a motion. Jen, you want to help me out with that one? But I should do for this motion.
I think you are accepting the restoration plan, but requiring that work begin on the restoration this fall.
Yep.
And that surety be posted to ensure completion.
All right. So moved.
Can I
You're learning, my friend.
Catching on.
Can I ask one question before we finalize this? Just so I'm clear, the calculation for the surety amount. In the past, we've been able to provide an engineer's estimate to Jen's office. We work that out, come to an agreement, and that ends up being the surety amount. Is that the way that we would do this as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Still stick with Al second. Want me to ask?
Good.
Okay. Al second. Roll call vote.
Benson, aye.
Callfield's aye.
Spady, aye. All right.
Hey,
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Have a good one.
Oh, Ben was able to come back on his own.
and we're back. Well, I didn't get removed. I just had my camera shut off. But
she likes you better.
He's a co-host. He can put his own camera back on.
Take care, guys. Thank you.
See ya. Calling the next order of business of the Conservation Commission, certificate of compliance, 520 Foundry Street.
The last song list is completed, so they're ready for a full certificate of compliance.
Very good. Any comments from members of the commission on this? All right, I'll do a motion to issue a full certificate of compliance for 520 Foundry Street.
Second.
Carol motion, Spady a second. Roll call vote.
Benson, aye.
Carol, aye.
Callfield's aye.
Spady, aye.
Turning to our next request for certificate of compliance, 66 Highland Street, request for certificate of compliance for a septic upgrade.
So when I did the site inspection, we found there was still compost in the wetlands. There's a new buyer. They've added new compost to the wetland. And so when I had contacted the engineer and the applicant, they were trying to get in touch with the real estate agent and the new buyer. And so I would continue this to the next meeting.
Very good. I'm just opening my calendar to make sure I get the date of the next meeting correct. Is that
8/7.
August 8/7? Wow. Motion to continue the hearing on 66 Highland Street's request for certificate of compliance to the 8/7 meeting of the Conservation Commission.
Callfeld second.
Carol with the motion, Callfeld second. Roll call vote.
Benson, aye.
Carol, aye.
Callfield's aye.
Spady, aye.
Very good. looks like nothing under enforcement this week, Jen.
It wasn't posted that way, so I'll have an update as the staff report.
Okay. Board discussion. We have associate members on. I'm not sure. I think let's skip over that for now. And Jen, I think we had some proposed discussion or presentation on bylaws.
Yes. Gonna promote Lauren.
Hello.
Hey, Lauren.
So I have a PowerPoint. I have 3 PowerPoints prepared, but we'll start off with Riverfront, have a discussion and see where we are from there. Okay, sorry, I need to share my screen. Awesome. Slideshow from the beginning. So this we're talking about the riverfront area and the Wetlands Protection Act and the bylaw interests and values are the same for both of them. So it protects private or public water supply, groundwater, prevents pollution, protects land containing shellfish, protects wildlife habitat, protects fishery, prevents storm damage, and it's used as flood control. So the Wetlands Protection Act for undeveloped has performance standards of protection of other resource areas. So whatever other resource areas fall within the riverfront, we need to follow those performance standards. Protection of rare species, so no adverse effects on their habitat. And then practical and substantially equivalent economic alternatives. And that means there's no alternatives that have less adverse effects. For WPA riverfront, for undeveloped lands, so you can't have any significant adverse impact, 5,000 square feet max, or 10% of alteration, and that's whatever is greater. Sorry. So there's there has to be a corridor of 100 feet of natural vegetation, and if that's not feasible, to the extent that is part of the performance standards. So for lots recorded before 1996, can allow a single family house, a septic system, a driveway where the shape and size so where the shape or size of lots prevents construction from meeting requirements, that's an exception, or a notwithstanding. And then for also lots recorded before 1996, may allow commercial structures of minimum feasible dimension, and that's where the size and shape prevents construction from meeting requirements. That's also an exception. For Wetlands Protection Act, the redevelopment for riverfront, So proposed work shall not result in improvement, shall result in improvement of conditions, and no portion of riverfront should be degraded. Storm management is provided by department, can't be located closer than existing conditions or 100 feet. Existing structures, additions must face away from the river, so it can't be built on the side that where the river is. And work shall not exceed degraded area, or it can alter a riverfront up to 10% if the degraded area is less than 10%. Also for Wetlands Protection Act for redevelopment, restoration and mitigation do apply. So for restoration, is allowed with the ratio 1:1 square feet of restoration area. Not conforming to criteria, areas immediately along river shall be restored. So closer to the river should be restored, rather than like the 200 feet away from the river. Restoration shall include removal of debris, retaining trees or mature vegetation, degrading topography, topsoil coverage, erosion control, plants, like plants and seeds for erosion control. For mitigation, there's a ratio of 2:1 square feet of mitigation area of alteration for not conforming to criteria. Areas not conforming start at the boundary, so mitigation will start closer to the river. And then there are certain activities, grandfathered activities or exempt activities from for redevelopment in the Wetlands Protection Act. So for bylaw, riverfront perennials, and this is for the perennial streams. So the performance standards allow no activity or work other than maintenance of an already existing structure within the riverfront area. Proposed work must meet performance standards of all other resource areas located within the riverfront, including buffer zone, and that's just like the Wetlands Protection Act. And we also require an alternatives analysis, and that we need evidence that shows there's not an equivalent economic alternative. And that's unless if it's in a redevelopment. So bylaw riverfront area for both perennial and intermittent stream, there's a single family house discretion exception, and performance standards just need to meet the maximum extent feasible. The maximum extension of yard is only what is necessary for construction. For performance standards for redevelopment, previously altered land, no new structures is to be placed on a pervious surface within the first 50 feet of a riverfront area. And if it's in an area of environmental concern, critical environmental concern, there is additional 100 feet of jurisdiction beyond the 200 riverfront area. So the bylaw for riverfront for intermittent streams can get a little messy. So for intermittent riverfronts, you have to comply with other resource areas located in the riverfront area, either if the other resource area is partially or wholly in it, it's 200 feet otherwise. But if we have different performance standards for different types of streams, and so when it breaks down type 1, type 2, type 3, type 4, I believe it's talking about already disturbed or altered land. So type 1, it's 75 feet, type 2 is 50 feet, type 3 is 25 feet, and type 4 is 0 feet. that can get a little messy because I'm not sure who is actually going out there and identifying which type of intermittent stream a stream is. But so that can get a little confusing. And there's it's a discretionary exception for unusual circumstances. And our bylaw doesn't specify this, but I'm assuming that this is for not like natural land or undeveloped land, because alteration is up to 10% of a recorded lot with a 50-foot wide corridor to be preserved, or the maximum extent possible. And for that unusual circumstance, it's more strict than what we have for just type 1, type 2, type 3, type 4. So a lot more strict. So that's where it gets a little messy. So I want to talk about other towns' riverfront regulations. And the main one that stood out to me was Burlington. They also regulate intermittent streams when a lot of other towns, when I was looking through, didn't. But they regulate both perennial and intermittent streams as the same. So they have the same performance standards, basically. And this town has a map of all the rivers in their town that should be regulated. It doesn't mention in their regulations if a stream is not on the map, like what they do there. So I'm not quite sure for that, but they have a map of all the town's rivers. For performance standards, it's a lot like the WPA. So no equivalent economic alternatives with less adverse effects on values. Mitigation shall not have a significant adverse impacts. So the Wetland Protection Act exemptions and grandfatherings apply, except substantial excavation like in-ground pools and foundations cannot be exempt, and developed riverfronts may require improvements. So basically I have just some questions on this section and recommendations. So when they're talking about performance standards, intermittent streams does not get mentioned in C1, which is the no activity or work within a riverfront area. But when it starts talking about the performance standards for intermittent streams in C3, it refers back to that section. So I'm suggesting we add intermittent streams to that section because it just has perennial in parentheses, and then I think it should be perennial and intermittent. I think we mentioned in C1 that the riverfront is 200 feet. I don't think it's really mentioned too much in the performance standards that the riverfront area is 200 feet. So I think that should just be in there so everybody knows 200 feet you're not really supposed to touch. So I think we should get rid of different types of intermittent streams. I think it's super confusing on deciding whether it's a type 4 or type 1. And basically the types, type 2 and 3 kind of fall under type 1. So it's a little messy, that area. So, and I also recommend to regulate perennial and intermittent streams as they are equal. So meaning they should just have the same performance standards. And if not, we should produce performance standards that are doable for intermittent streams, meaning basically meaning the types. Like, I don't think that's very doable. I don't think that's followed a lot. So I think basically they should just be regulated as the same. So, and intermittent streams usually do flow into perennial streams or other resource areas. So they are just as important as perennial streams, for the most part. And so I do have some questions. So perennial streams, for redevelopment, alternative analysis excludes C7, so previously altered riverfront. So that means like they can do, so that means there's a performance standards for them both, like said earlier. And it's saying that perennial streams excludes the single family house discretionary exception, but the previously altered riverfront is not excluded from that. So, but it is still stated under both of them. So I'm wondering basically if C7, the previously altered riverfront, should be stated as an exemption under perennial. And then I want to know what the difference between redevelopment and disturbed is. They are very similar, basically, because I think that's what sets some of these performance standards apart. Like, it's this much for disturbed lands and this much for redevelopment, and they're different performance standards. So I'm just wondering if there's actually a difference between that. And then since it's not really specified, I want to know what circumstances, say if we kept the different types of intermittent streams and stuff, does the applicant use 75, 50, 25, 0 feet versus the 150 and 10%, or versus the 200 feet versus the 50 feet of redevelopment for an intermittent stream? And then I asked, how can the discretionary exception for intermittent streams be more strict than regular performance standards for intermittent streams? Because like I said, the 75, 50, 25, 0 there wasn't really this is when you use this, except if it's that type of stream. But it doesn't make sense to me on what basically why that's more strict. And that's all I have for that PowerPoint. Does anybody have any questions? I know that was kind of a lot at once.
Yeah, I think it kind of highlights I think this section of our bylaw, it's just confusing.
It's a bit messy.
Yeah, it's a bit messy. And I guess what I'm realizing a gap in my knowledge is just the functional difference between the types of intermittent streams. And is there legitimately a reason that we're going to want to regulate them differently? Not that I'm sure that we do at the moment.
I can't really see a.
Yeah, so I will tell you, in my 6 years, I've never had an applicant come in and say this is a type 1 intermittent stream or a type 2 or type 3, partly because most of the definitions are over a 3-year period. You have to do observations. So I don't think anybody's going out there and doing the observations over a multi-year period, because you have to have flow and all this other stuff that over a period of time, months, and all this other stuff. So I think you're correct in saying that while I think the intent was to provide some flexibility to be below 200 foot enforcement on this, that in practicality we essentially just use the 200 with some. I think that we've taken it as a commission historically to provide some flexibility when it's an intermittent stream. I think it's the way it's written is you're unable to follow it, and I think, Lauren, you actually touched on something that we struggled with in one particular case several years ago, that the intermittent stream standards seem to be more strict than the regular riverfront, which was, I don't think was the writer's intent at the time. We actually had a fluvinologist. We actually had one in about 4 or 5 years ago to go over all these intermittent streams because we didn't understand them. And while he was very, very informative, I learned a little bit about rivers. I don't think it helped us understand the intermittent stream all that much. So while I think in theory it was probably the right thing to do, I think we don't have a way to apply it in any sort of consistent manner. So I think you're probably correct in saying we should probably have one standard and try and figure out how to apply it. I think one of the challenges that we have is that around town there are an awful lot of drainage ditches that are intermittent streams, and they're man-made drainage ditches. They're not, because of the way development has happened around town. It's just the way it is, and so I think that's where it comes from. I don't think we've applied it that way very much. We just say it's an intermittent stream is an intermittent stream. But I think that's been one of the challenges as we look at it. I don't know. I mean, we see things called on plans all the time as intermittent streams, and they're marked with a 200-foot riverfront on them because nobody wants to go out and make the determination what level of an intermittent stream it is. So that's just my 2 cents.
Yeah. So, yeah, intermittent streams, I think if they were going to be regulated separately than perennial streams, I think it should just have one standard, one like performance standards and not break it into the different types. I think that just makes it more confusing, and I don't think it's actually being applied here. So
I think you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
Agreed.
So are other towns just treating intermittent streams as wetlands?
So when I was looking at other towns' performance standards, a lot of, or like just resource areas, a lot of them don't even regulate intermittent streams, but they are definitely important to our bylaw wetland values. So I do think they are important to regulate, but like, for example, town of Burlington does regulate intermittent streams, but they just regulate a stream is a stream. It's a river. Like, there's no, you do this for an intermittent stream and you do this for a perennial stream. It's just, they all have the same performance standards.
How many times do we think that we see intermittent streams without a bordering vegetative wetland? I mean, does it happen very often, Jennifer?
Without BVW?
Yeah, I mean, most of the time it's associated with a BVW.
Does it ever happen?
I don't.
Maybe it's happened. Yeah, but it's
maybe
would be pretty unusual. So
it could be sections of it, but there would not be one whole stream without any BVW. That would be really odd.
Yeah, I'm not too sure on if that really happens that often. So
no, I think my point is probably that they're as regulated under BVW as they are as anything else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And in those performance standards, it does say that you have to follow other performance standards of all the other resource areas in that area. So basically, yeah, just following the performance standards for a BVW is still protecting the riverfront if there's an intermittent stream in there, but it's ideal to see that 200 feet to protect the values.
So most of the bylaw, you really do have it's 200 feet and you're not supposed to touch any of it. Then there is the single family home discretionary exemption
10%,
but it still requires 150-foot no disturb area and potentially up to 10% alteration. So that's like one little step down.
Yeah,
but that would be that's also across an entire lot. right? Not just an area within the buffer zone,
Correct.
which is very confusing to me. Because I don't think we've seen this. This is like a law school problem, right? But like you could have a 20-acre lot and you could have a section of it has an intermittent stream, and you're limited by this bylaw theoretically to only being able to cut 10% of the lot. Even it's a weird
So
problem.
10% mirrors the state act,
Okay.
right? The state law that says commission may allow 5,000 square feet or up to 10% of the riverfront area of
Yeah.
undeveloped land. So I think you were the bylaw was trying to mirror that. And then, well, there aren't a whole lot of cases where there are single family homes proposed. And if they do, we'll do this discretionary exemption. But then the stream type 75, 50, 25, and 0 came in, where maybe, and I wasn't here then, and most of you weren't either, but maybe that's when you were trying to say, if it was already a developed lot,
Yeah.
then you were going to do that, but that's not what the bylaw says. And I'm not sure you'd get that 75 feet anyway, because most houses are really right up against the wetland for most of the projects that we see now anyway.
If it's already developed, it's already developed.
Yeah.
Yeah, I will say, probably that, of all the sections in the local bylaw, that one, it actually makes the least sense to me. And that's saying a lot, I think it's confusing. I think it's, we as a commission are unable to find a way to use it to make sense. And so I think part of our goal here is to make these regulations a little bit more streamlined and understandable, to not just us, but also to the general public and the contractors.
Agreed completely. So I am sort of I'm personally in favor of having a perennial and intermittent stream and separating that out.
Okay.
Does anybody feel otherwise?
No, if we can delineate between the performance standards between the two, I think it works fine. The way it's written now is absolutely, you cannot. There's like Lauren says, in some ways, if in a strict reading of it, it may actually be more strict under intermittent than it is under perennial.
So I think what I would propose at this point is, if it's okay with everyone, I'd like to just take a stab at some language and then just start having discussions about it, because I think this is a section that, to be honest with you, I'm concerned about just consistently applying it and being able to understand it enough that if a substantial project came before us with these issues, that I'm gonna be able to do that fairly.
And one way to help do that is to follow Burlington's example of just creating a map. Yeah. And you can do that using all the terminology and the requirements from Wetland Protection Act, and have someone go through the exercise of checking each stream to see what the 99% flow elevation is and percentage of stratified drift, and come up with a map that clearly defines this is perennial, this is intermittent. And then you can have the sections that say perennial streams have these performance standards, intermittent streams have these performance standards, if you want to keep them broken up. But you can eliminate the whole, this is intermittent, it's perennial discussion by just evaluating it and creating the map that says this is what they are.
But is that realistic in Easton, where we have like we have a lot of old infrastructure that may not necessarily be mapped off of rivers? I mean, is that? Oh. I feel like these are things that pop up on delineations more so than are mapped. I don't know.
You could be right. Yeah.
I think though, in those cases, that was part of the point I think I was trying to make a little bit earlier, is that even if there is a missed intermittent stream, you're still going to be covered under the BVW.
Yeah.
And so it isn't like we're giving up a significant amount of protection, we're still looking at 100-foot buffer zone. So I think that there's an opportunity if we wanted to go this sort of black and white approach to this and give a straightforward path to applicants. You're still protected under BVW guidelines.
That's fair.
And bank.
Yeah.
Bank is a resource area too.
Yeah. I mean, I guess what about just mapping? It's supposed to be easier. The perennial streams.
I mean, technically they already are. You follow the GS topo, and you're supposed to be able to tell which one is perennial, which one's intermittent. That's where all of that delineation starts.
Okay.
And then the rest of Wetland Protection Act definitions talk about, well, if it's perennial or if it's intermittent, you can figure out the watershed area and stratified drift percentage and the 99% flow rate and determine, well, it shows as intermittent on the USGS, but it really is perennial. I mean, USGS, someone just took a marker and went, yeah, I think it's thin. I think it might be thicker. That's literally all that is. So it's the start of just looking at the area and looking at it in the field.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So for Burlington, I think they just put together a map. Like, I wish I could pull it up, but I don't have it readily available. But basically it's just like, it shows the town and then it shows like all these just blue squiggles. And if it's a stream or intermittent and perennial is on there. And
okay.
But I'm wondering if we just kind of did something like that, but just for perennial streams, so that people know where the perennial streams are, and then maybe intermittent streams can be based off of bank or BVW. But at the same time, I don't want to lose that 200 feet for that area, but maybe allow like more leniency when it comes to like waivers. I'm not quite sure how to start to.
The goal is to not lose protection. It's just to clarify the regs so that it's clear for other people. So we're not, not our intention to reduce protection. It's just to describe it better so people know what they're talking about.
Okay.
I think that one of the things that as we've been getting these presentations, I think we have to determine, is there something specific besides just making the regulations more streamlined? Is there another goal in our, is it climate change resiliency? Is it flood control, which is part of climate change resiliency? Is it, carbon sinks, which is part of climate change? I mean, these are, I think that we have to sort of think about what things we're going to sort of focus in on as we fine-tune these regulations and make sure that we are aware of, is it possible that goes the other way on climate change resiliency as opposed to its hardening? So I mean, that's just something for us to consider. I think I know when I was reviewing the two presentations were already made before tonight, and that's something that sort of struck me as important for us to keep in consideration as we continue to push this forward.
Yeah, I agree. We need.
So we have started trying. We thought of it in two parts, right? One, just to sort of simplify what we already have.
Yeah.
And then say, okay, here's the clean copy of what we already have, just simplified, and then take the next pass at it and say, are there things that we really should be improving for performance standards for, like you said, climate resiliency, and just anything that we're sort of missing out of our performance standards. So we were kind of looking at it in two passes, just so it wouldn't be so overwhelming to anybody who might be watching. And to make it clear that, you know, we're not trying to make it less protective. Just to do that first pass of, let's figure out what this is supposed to be saying and make it clear how to do things. And then come back in, as Rory said, and take another look at the standards and make sure they are inclusive.
Yeah,
Agreed.
I agree. We need to, I think it would be a good idea to look at the, like, once it's simplified, look at the standards and try to come up with ways to make these standards more achievable. And that's where I was trying to get at, but yeah, the simplified version, me and Jen have been working on just simplifying the regs, not really changing anything. So yeah, I'm hoping to show you guys that at some point too.
We've only been talking about that for 5 years. So.
Well, we only have Lauren for 2 more meetings, so we're going to be moving quickly.
All right.
I think Lauren brought up a good point. At least in that one area, their internal consistency just isn't there. So that's another thing we ought to be a little wary of as we're going through, that everything is internally consistent in the regs.
Yeah, and part of that reason is the way the regs are built. I mean, they allow for inconsistency between performance standards, which doesn't make any sense. I know it drives, Jennifer crazy, but
hard to advise people when they're preparing their application.
It's easier to write one section of performance standards and just refer to it every single time in each section, as opposed to rewrite it every single time and get it a little bit different each time.
So Lauren has 2 more. Very short.
Yeah, so
2 slides, right? The other one is what?
So there's the rivers, streams, and creeks, which is a different resource area compared to the riverfront. And then we also have one on butters, which is only 2 slides. The river, streams, and creeks is 10 slides, and it looks wordy, but I'm not going to read through all of it. Because basically a lot of it's like repeated from the WPA and
okay, so this is your
riverfront area.
Go for it, but let's go for it.
Okay, so the river, streams, and creeks.
That's my suggestion.
Okay.
So we're trying to push along here to get these last 2 in, because after that we're on the actual reg revisions. So if everybody's good with hanging in there for a little bit longer, we can get these 2 done. Then we just have quick end to our meeting.
Okay, so first off, my first slide, I just want to specify rivers, streams, and creeks is only a bylaw resource area, so it's not regulated in the Wetlands Protection Act. All the land around it is regulated, but not the water itself. So basically, this is just repeated resource areas are not regulate. This resource area is not regulated in WPA. And I just want to specify banks, riverfront, and land underwater are different resource areas. So my goals for revising this section is just to clarify definitions for both perennial and intermittent streams, as it's the water. Also want to clarify the values and the performance standards, because I think they kind of just did a little copy and paste from riverfront, and they're definitely different if we're just talking about just the water. In the definition for a perennial stream, it mentions horizontal zonation and vertical stratification. I didn't know the definitions of those, so basically I had to search it. They're in this, but basically add that to our definition section of the regs. And then I also want to make the intermittent stream section clearer. So it does talk about different types of intermittent streams, and it looks at hydrology. So basically, this is what we have now for a perennial stream, how it's defined. And this is basically all from the WPA. Basically, the only thing that is different is a river or a perennial stream is characterized by horizontal zonation as opposed to the vertical stratification typically associated with lakes, ponds, and abatements. That's where my confusion came in with horizontal zonation and vertical stratification. So this is my recommendations for perennial streams. So I think the definition should basically stay the same, but basically change the wording at the beginning of it. So the flowing water in a natural or man-made, the flowing water in a natural or man-made body of water that flows into any ocean, lake, pond, wetland, or other perennial streams which flows throughout the year. Basically, horizontal zonation is the distinct biological communities based on temperature, oxygen amount, type of substrate, and size of the area, while vertical stratification talks about layers of water based on temperature, chemical properties, and density. So the reader should know what constitutes as a perennial stream, but that is stated in the Wetlands Protection Act. So I don't think it actually does need to be stated here. As you saw from the last slide, it was stated it's the whole USG. If it's intermittent on the USGS, it's considered perennial. So basically that's the same as the Wetlands Protection Act. But any extra classification should be kept in the bylaw regulations, so people know. So for intermittent stream, basically it just defines it, but then it goes on about how someone can identify it, and it's basically like consistently has to go out every day. It's all in the that's also in the Wetlands Protection Act under Riverfront. So I don't know if we actually need that in there, but it might be helpful to have. It talks about longitudinal gradient of hydrology, and basically it just tells you how perennial streams can flow, and it basically saying that it can flow the same as a perennial stream, but if it flows the same as a perennial stream, isn't it considered a perennial stream? That was a question I had there. That's why that's underlined. And basically, for types, it defines each type, but type 1, so type 1, it's first through third order, and basically type 2 and 3 just kind of fall under it at type 1 as water flows into the as type 1 water flows into type 2 or 3 because of the only difference is it originates at head of the stream. So recommendations of intermittent streams, I think the definition should just be changed at the beginning, basically saying it's the water in a segment of a flowing course of a flowing water course, natural or man-made, that regularly experiences naturally occurring sporadic flow interruptions. I think to separate definition and separate the definition and how the commission will find out if it's a intermittent stream, as it's just like one big paragraph in our regulations that defines it, and then it goes into all the steps you have to take, like with the evidence going out consecutively. It's all just in one big paragraph, and I think that can get kind of confusing. Here it is again. I think we should get rid of types of intermittent streams and just identify intermittent streams as a whole. And I have a question on how can an intermittent stream have the same hydrology of a perennial stream, which I pointed out in the last slide. For performance standards, basically it's saying that the 200-foot riverfront area shall apply, and the performance standards of bank and land underwater shall apply. So for my recommendations for performance standards, I tried to use some language that is already used in the regulations. So, because the performance standards are just piggybacking off of other areas. And I think we should have performance standards that are specific to this area. So this is what I recommend for performance standards. No activity or work other than maintenance of an already existing structure, which will result in building within or on or removing, filling, or altering a river or stream, or within 200 feet to protect by law wetland values of a river or stream. The commission may grant a waiver of this performance standard. And then I also think another performance standard should be shall now alter water temperature and base flow, including pumping water out of the rivers, including pumping water out of river and stream, nor impair the river or stream's ability to replenish groundwater. So recommendations for values, in this section, they have it separated between perennial and intermittent, but if you actually look at it, they basically have the same values. So the only difference was that perennial has public/private water supply as a value and intermittent doesn't. And I believe that the intermittent does supply, protect public and private water supply, as a lot of intermittent streams actually flow into other resource areas where that is a value. And we don't want discharge from intermittent streams just to be affecting that. So, and then I think we should also add erosion and sediment flow, because based off control, because as a value, because based off of the flow of a river or stream, sediments are either dropped or carried, and that prevents them from entering other resource areas. So I think that's an important function to have. And that's all I have for rivers, streams, and creeks. Kind of shorter to the point, but yeah.
Jen, we can't hear you.
You can't hear me?
No, Jennifer. We heard you, Lauren.
We first
I was like, don't know.
We were looking at the resource areas, and they say go look at 3 other performance standards. Go look at 3 other resource areas. So then we were trying to pick out, well, you have rivers, streams, and creeks. If we already protect the bank, we protect the BVW, the land under the rivers or streams or creek, and the riverfront area, then what are you trying to protect with rivers, streams, and creeks? And so we thought you must be trying to protect the water itself. So does anyone know if that's accurate? This was our best guess.
Yeah.
Sounds logical.
Otherwise, you're repeating stuff we're already protecting. Okay. So does that sound reasonable, and that's really where we should be headed? Or does anyone know, anyone else we should ask?
Yeah. I mean, aren't we protecting water under the perennial stream? Isn't that one of the interests? Did I make that up?
I mean, it might be an interest, but all the performance standards talk about the 200-foot upland riverfront area, or whatever else is in that 200 feet moving horizontally from the mean annual high water mark. So it's the highest, well, not the highest, but the mean annual water line, not the highest level or the lowest level. We're not really talking about the water there. Wetland Protection Act doesn't protect the actual water. It only protects the bank, the land under it, and the riverfront. So if you were looking to do something different than, or more restrictive than Wetland Protection Act, then we must be talking about the river itself, the stream itself, the water.
Yeah. That's what I was thinking as well. We talked about this, but that's why I tried to incorporate like water temperature and the performance standards, not like removing or pumping out water. Maybe like there might be a certain amount that people are allowed to pump out. I don't know if that's like, that could be regulated. And then I also tried to incorporate like, because it replenishes groundwater. So if you pump out a certain amount, how is that supposed to help replenish groundwater? So basically affecting any of those values, I tried to put in the performance standards, so it's not just piggybacking off of the land underwater, banks, and riverfront. Any questions?
Jennifer, Lauren, do we know when that section of the regulations was last updated? It just might give us some idea of who we might.
Yeah, so I am not 100% sure, but I have the regulations on me right now, so
Yeah, I don't need the answer now. It's just if you get that information to me, I might be able to help us.
Yeah.
Have some conversations with people about what we were trying to accomplish. The other thing is, to be quite honest, we're a whole different group of people, and we can do what we need to do either way. So I mean, we're not bound to do something that someone implemented 20 years ago. So.
Okay.
Ready for the last one? 2 slides?
Yes. Sorry, I'm just writing down that question so I can look into it. When was the version? Okay. So let me share my screen again. And this one's only 2 slides. It's pretty short and it's to the point. Slideshow from the beginning. So this, we're talking about abutters, basically a person filing for a permit application or a request for determination shall give notice to all abutters by certified mail or hand delivery with evidence. I'm not really sure how you can hand deliver something with evidence. So basically just certified mail, which costs money. And for abutters for Easton properties, are properties within 300 feet of the property line. So if you look at these pictures, this top one, you can see it's a lot, it extends 300 feet from their property line. And I suggest having abutters be within 100 feet of a property line, at least for certain projects, because we'll discuss that. But like for septic systems. So basically they're direct neighbors, but I'm not sure if this is possible. Me and Jen were discussing how it's a bit excessive to have 300 feet for like projects such as like septic system repairs or just septic systems as a whole. But however, 300 feet is stated in the bylaw, but I wonder if there's a loophole for certain projects. So for my examples, so 7R-15 is what we just looked at for Pequannock Avenue earlier in this meeting. And as of now, they have to let 13 properties know about a new septic tank. And as you can see, it's not even like just their neighbors, it's like their neighbors. Like it's a lot of people. And those mailing costs saying that each certified mail is $8 is going to be about $104 in mailing costs, and that's a lot to let people know that you need a new septic tank. But if it was only 100 feet, they would only let 7 properties know, and it's only about $56 in mailing costs. It basically cuts it in half. So not quite in half, but like, pretty close to it. And here are just some other examples. Oh, I'm sorry. So 9R80, 9R80, that was the Karen Marie circle that we looked at. They need to let 19 properties know about their new septic system. And they would pay about $152 in mailing costs. However, if the butters were only 100 feet, they'd only need to let 5 properties know and pay about $40 in mailing costs. You can probably see the difference in these top 2 photos of just how much that 300 feet line actually incorporates. I feel like it could be a bit excessive for certain projects. So for 15R-4E, I believe that's the property on Bay Road, and they need to let 11 properties know about their new septic system, and that would pay about $88 in mailing costs. If abutters were only 100 feet, they would only need to let 6 properties know and pay about $48 in mailing costs. So a lot cheaper. Just might be in the better interest of the applicant. However, so for 37U-73, I believe they requested a continuance, but that was Washington Street. And they need to let 39 properties know about wetland boundaries that are being delineated, and those mailing costs would be about $312. However, if abutters were only 100 feet, they would need to let 19 properties know and pay $152 in mailing costs. I do want to point out, though, it might be different for a request for determination, as there, I don't know. I can see how that could be different. It's different than a septic system, and I believe I don't know, or a commercial project, if they're putting up a giant building, I can see why it's 300 feet, but for something as small as a septic system, I think it's a bit excessive. So that's.
Yeah, I mean, I think you make the point, Lauren, about, an ANRAD has sort of implications. Usually there's, depending on the project, sometimes it's strictly an ANRAD wanting to know if they put a single house on the property, but sometimes they're trying to do development. You may want to make sure to sort of understand that the butters may have a little bit wider need to do that. So I think you're right in sort of making that assessment. There may be project. Jennifer, do we have an exception within our butter notifications right now about some property over a certain amount of acreage? We decrease because I can remember there was one piece of property that they had to notify, because it was a huge, I don't know if it could have been borderland or something where, they have to notify hundreds of people because of how big the property is. You're on mute.
Trying to make sure the dog didn't make noise.
Yeah.
So Wetland Protection Act, they do have some other categories. If it's a long linear project of 1,000 feet, or if your project is a small section within a really large parcel, then you only have to notify a certain number of people. And I think that's probably what they were trying to mirror.
I think the latter part was definitely what they were trying to do.
Yeah, there's another one for if if it's like a big condo association, you can notify just the trustees. And then it's supposed to be up to the trustees to notify everybody else versus everybody notifying everyone separately within that condo association.
Yeah, that could be a nightmare.
Be a lot. But then you have to make sure, well, you don't have to make sure, the trustees are supposed to make sure everybody
Yeah.
in the condo association knows about that. So just
So if we wanted to change this, is this a bylaw change for us, or do we think there's some avenue for us to change regulations?
I think we need to look, reread the bylaw and see what it says in the bylaw language itself and see if there's any latitude for adjusting for smaller projects.
Great.
Sounds
Yeah.
good.
Yeah, I mean, these routine septics that come before us, you know, like you said, direct abutters probably need to know. Beyond that, probably not.
Yeah, I just think if someone's changing their septic, it can be a bit of excessive for 300 feet, because you're letting people know in like different neighborhoods sometimes, like, you know, I don't think it's really gonna affect all those people.
Agreed.
So basically, if we can find a loophole to basically only make
Let's refer to it as flexibility.
Yes,
yeah, to have some flexibility in there. Like I said, only for certain projects. I think if a big industrial building or commercial building or stuff like that is going up, I think it's pretty necessary for 300 feet, because that affects a lot of people. So a lot more people than a septic system would. So
Makes sense.
So we're up to the point where, what do you want to see for the next meeting, the next presentation? So we're working on the simplified version. Do you think you're ready for the full simplified version if we've got that finished?
I think probably ready to see it in a packet, but I think we should probably break it into a couple of bites.
Yep.
Could that be distributed to the members before the meeting so that we can have a chance to read it over and, you know, go through the whole thing? Or what's supplied?
yeah, I think we can do that. That's, yeah.
That would be great.
That would be helpful.
Yeah.
And instead of putting it in the packet, I would send it as a separate email, just so it doesn't get lost and it's not taking up a lot of space.
Yeah, just a draft for discussion or something like that.
Yeah. Is there any like PowerPoints you want me to touch on? Any other resource areas you want like clarification on, or anything else?
I think I'd like to focus on just some changes, some proposed changes.
Okay, proposed changes.
Yeah, I think that would be just how can we how can we clean up the regulations, for lack of a better term? And
yeah, I think simplifying it will do a lot.
Yeah.
Basically having everything be straightforward, that can do wonders in itself. But for proposed changes, do you want more than that? Like, do you want me to suggest like, oh, I think this section should be changed to X, Y, and Z?
I think for now, just cleaning up the language would be a great first step here.
Awesome.
Anybody feel strongly otherwise? I think if we try to do too many things at once, we'll wind up struggling to get any of it done.
Yeah. I agree.
So anything else?
Thank you, Lauren.
Thank you so much.
No problem.
This really has been very helpful, and I think tonight is, in my opinion, the most complicated section of our bylaw.
Yes, I agree with that.
So thank you for taking it on. So our next order of business is chair updates. I just want to let everybody know that Jennifer and I have been working on the letter that we discussed last meeting regarding Tufts. We've been back and forth. It's still in process, but I think we'll probably get a draft of that circulated to the commission before the probably before the next meeting. You think that's realistic, Jennifer?
Yes.
Do you have any updates?
I have a slight update from the CPC, and there was a brief discussion given by Stephanie on the overview of the property that we voted on last meeting. The CPC was generally in favor. Stephanie gave a nice presentation on it. Again, it was a preliminary application. I just added a couple small things. The explanation of the $9,000 that was spent by the Conservation Commission for the survey and the appraisal, and so I think it went very well, and they generally understood and were supportive. So I have no reason to think that won't be accepted, and also won't be accepted for the fall meeting. So we're on track.
That's awesome.
Great, Al. Thank you.
Jen, did you have any updates?
Just a couple. We started to talk about enforcement. 20 Central Street, they've gone and cleared riverfront area again in between the building and the canal and the actual river. I did send, I tried to get in contact with them. I've received no reply. So are you looking at an additional, a second enforcement order at this point? Is probably what you need to send.
I think so.
Okay.
I guess how does that work with an existing enforcement order?
Doesn't matter. You just send another one. My thoughts are to also send that to DEP.
Yeah.
Give them, ask them to intervene and speak with town council about how to find, if that's something that you're interested in pursuing.
I mean,
I just need to know how to do it, whether
at
you
this
want
point,
to.
I think you know, if we're going to be ignored, it probably is, in my opinion, appropriate to think about fines, which is not something we've done since I've been here. But I think we had extensive conversations about what was to be done and what wasn't to be done back there, and for something to happen and then not be responded to, I think it warrants a conversation about fines.
At least for you to know the process if you
Yeah.
decide to go forward with it. There are a few questions that I have for town council.
Yeah, I would say let's put that on for an enforcement discussion next meeting, and if we don't hear back from the applicant, be in a position to move forward with some fines.
Okay. The other one is 80 Short Street. We received a call from an abutter. This is a project probably 2 years ago. They had an enforcement situation. They came in for a permit to remove soil from the wetland. It looks like there were a few cement trucks there last week, and they poured new concrete within 50 feet of the wetland. The owner said that he was planning to remove the soil last weekend and call me for a site inspection this week. So I still have to hear from him this week, but just an update for you all. And now fun stuff. Clifford Grant, the trail has been reconstructed. So nice
Awesome.
job, Lauren, this weekend. We, Chris Patrick had a number of volunteers, 8 or 10 volunteers come to reestablish the trail where it's supposed to be. Lauren and I closed off the wetland portions and restored the wetland, and then the other trail through the Doyle property et al. Has been closed. The stone wall has been reestablished, and Lauren and I restored the wetland in between the stone wall and the trail. So it looks fantastic. Go take a look.
Great work. Thank you for doing that.
The tough lease has been signed. That is for the fields, the barn, and the workshop. Everyone's very excited that this has been done. We're the old septic, the old cesspool part of it was open or damaged, or we got that filled in today. And so that's now safe, and the electric is something that we'll be working on, providing temporary electric for the barn and the workshop. The other thing is we received the MVP 2.0 grant. So we got 95,000 from the MVP program to reinvigorate our municipal vulnerability preparedness plan with a little bit more of a focus on environmental justice areas. So that's something that's going to be coming up in the next several weeks.
Phenomenal.
Yeah, so good news too.
All around. Was that it, Jennifer?
Yes.
More than enough, but just making sure I wasn't stepping on you. Any pertinent item not reasonably anticipated by the chair? Does anybody have anything that they want to add? All right, seeing that, I will ask for a motion.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Carol, second.
All right.
Spady with the motion, Benson with the second. Roll call vote.
Benson, I.
Carol, I.
All falls aye.
Beatty, aye.
Okay, thank you,
Thank you,
everyone.
everybody.
Later, guys.
Thank you. Night, folks.
Good night.